In this video, I am joined by the one and only Mr. Michael Ebba and the Italiana. We are going to talk about coasters. What constitutes a themed attraction? When does it cross that line between just a coaster and a themed attraction? There is a difference here. We're going to talk about it up next on OG 55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG 55. Today, we're talking all about coasters. Okay, what constitutes a themed attraction? So, when you theme a coaster, when does it become not just a coaster anymore? There does seem to be a little bit of a gray area here. There does seem to be a little bit of a difference in terms of this. So, we're going to talk about it, but we're not going to do any intros today. We're just going to jump right into the festivities. George, I'm going to start with you, brother. So, a themed attraction and just a coaster, right? When you have an attraction like, say, a coaster at Magic Mountain, what makes that just a coaster and, say, a coaster at Disney themed? What's the difference for you? What's that threshold the attraction needs to have in order for it to go from just a coaster to a themed attraction?
Well, I do have to say, I actually think there's three different types of categories that you can kind of go, and it's a themed immersive experience that just happens to be a coaster. You have just a basic amusement park roller coaster, and then you have that middle ground roller coaster where they kind of pass it off as a themed experience, but it's basically just a roller coaster that's just decorated, basically.
Right. And there is a difference between decoration and theming, and we'll get into that in a second. But go on, sir.
Excellent, absolutely. And for me, any like type of ride that's like in an amusement type of enterprise where whether it's Six Flags or Cedar Point, even Knott's Berry Farm, they're basically all just roller coasters. There's no storyline, there's no theme, there's no characters tied to them whatsoever. It's just a basic roller coaster. Now, when you get into Disney and Universal, that's where it can kind of get into a little bit of that controversy topic of like what is actually an immersive attraction to just a designed fancy type of roller coaster. Well, for an example, you take the Incredicoaster for an example. To me, it's basically California Screamin' that's decorated with the Incredible stuff on it. There's really nothing much to go on. They try to create a storyline to it where it's like Jack escaped.
Right.
The family of supers, along with the guests, have to try to catch him. There's like everything going on, but it just kind of misses the mark.
And the weird thing too, not to interrupt you, George, I'll let you continue in just a second, but the weird thing about that attraction, I actually thought it was more themed before the Incredibles were added, and I'll tell you why. It's a steel coaster, but it looks like a wooden coaster, right? Mm-hmm. So the theming is a wooden coaster on a pier, basically, right? But once you added the Incredibles, then it kind of took away from that, and now it looks like a coaster decorated with Incredibles. It kind of diminished that wooden coaster, old school kind of vibe, and now it's less themed than before, even.
Exactly, and what they had to do was normally when you're designing a roller coaster that's supposed to have theme, you kind of create the movement and the motion of the roller coaster to depict of what you're supposed to be seeing in the attraction. Sort of kind of like Cosmic Rewind, that even though it's a very thrilling roller coaster and it's basically it maneuvers you around to where you're supposed to be looking, but it's programmed that way. But when you have the Incredicoaster, that it was already just a basic seaside pier roller coaster, and then you're going to tie an IP to it, guess what? You can't slow down that roller coaster. You can't stop it. You can't make it go into a different direction. It's the same roller coaster from point A to point B to point C, and it's basically you just have to have the Incredibles kind of fill in to where you possibly can put them so guests can kind of see them. And that's pretty much it. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, uh, Cosmic Rewind is. I like to call Cosmic Rewind a wild card
Okay.
because even though it is themed to a storyline, especially like when you're in the queue and everything, and it gives you, it depicts a straight narrative storyline. You know, they beam guests up to Nova Corps, and this giant alien mutant creature steals the cosmic generator. They contact the Guardians. The Guardians asks us for their help to defeat the alien. But when you're on the ride itself, it's so fast, it's so dark, and it moves you practically everywhere that you're not necessarily paying attention to the storyline as it continues. You're more so paying attention to the music that's playing. You're enjoying the attraction as its own, or as OG's doing, praying that he could actually get off the attraction sooner than later. You know,
Right.
it's like,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
yeah. So that's why I can figure that the Cosmic Rewind is more of a wild card when it comes to that.
Well,
Now, for an actual all-around themed roller coaster, actually, Michael brought this up when we were having this conversation, which is the influence of this topic that we were having. Is two of them actually, one from Disney and one from Universal, and that's Expedition Everest. I feel like is an all-around great themed roller coaster, and Hagrid's Motorbike.
right. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll go, Ebba. You go first, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Oh, man. All right. So, I mean, pretty much George already kind of said all my thoughts, but I want to kind of go back to the theming aspect, right? Like, to his point, I think that you can have a theme for anything, but I believe there's a varying degree of theme, right? So you look at Six Flags, right? Like, there's Superman ride or Riddler's Revenge, or like the new Wonder Woman, right? Right? There's a general, like, theme, right? You got the color, you got the name, right? But there's no substance, there's no story, there's no like character in like the ride. I guess Superman they have it at the top, but you know, there's none of that going on. So I think there's a varying degree levels of theming you can do. So like in Credit Coaster, you have some theme like like the paint color, you have the characters plastered in like the tubes and whatnot. But when you want like a immersive experience, then that's when you look to something like Expedition Everest, or Hagrid's, or I'll even say Big Thunder Mountain, right? So I think that there's other coasters, and then you look at something like again Wonder Woman or Viper or something, where it's just a paint job with a name, and then it's just a coaster. Now, granted, they're all just coasters in the very end, right? That's what they are, coasters. But you look at the coasters at Disneyland, and then something like Six Flags, which, by the way, I'm not saying that these are bad rides at all. But if you want that immersive experience, that's where Disney comes into play.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is like I feel like what makes just a coaster and what makes an immersive experience or more of a themed experience too is I think the more exposed the coaster is when it looks like the coaster, I think it's less and less of a themed experience. So for something like Big Thunder, it does a really good job at like hiding the coaster element. The coaster track is basically the train track, so it all kind of fits that theme. You know what I'm saying? Same goes for Expedition Everest. I don't know, is that technically like a mine cart or something, or maybe like train? I don't know, but it's still nonetheless like the track to that train that carries you through Everest, right? So it fits the theme. The track is used as part of the the story, right? Or something like Tron is kind of just decorated, right? Because it's just a coaster with some pretty lights on it. That's not themed necessarily, right? So that's kind of where I'm at. Even Velocicoaster, I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this in the comments, I'm sure. It's a great coaster. I mean, it's not for me, but everyone that's ever ridden it that loves roller coasters loves Velocicoaster. But it's a roller coaster with some static dinosaurs. It's decorated. In my opinion, it's not, the track isn't seamless into that experience. It's very much a coaster, like all the way through, just like the Incredicoaster. It's a coaster with some Jack Jacks and some Mr. Incredible statues. That's decoration. That's not really a themed experience. So for me, and this is all subjective, but for me, that's the delineation. That's the difference between like, okay, it's just a coaster and it's a themed experience. Now, George, you did mention Cosmic Rewind. Mm-hmm. That one's interesting, along with Space Mountain, because those, it kind of, the coaster tracks are hidden in the darkness. So it almost sort of, for me, that makes a difference. It like, for me, it crosses that line to a themed experience because it is invisible to the naked eye. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying with that? Would you agree
So
with that?
more so, yeah, I could understand that as far as like flying in space. So yeah, it definitely gives you that immersive kind of feel, like again where you don't see the track. Now, when it comes just to the storytelling of it, I guess that's where I kind of see Cosmic Rewind as the wild card. It's
Right.
almost like for that immersive like outer space experience. Absolutely, yeah, it doesn't feel like a coaster. Um, but when it comes to the storyline, I feel like that there wasn't really enough in there for it to kind of get people's attention because of the type of ride it is. You know, I don't really think there's really anything that you really could do to it because, and I think that's why they put a lot of the storyline narrative in the queue. So you kind of already put that mentality of like what you're doing, you know. And as I said, Cosmic Rewind is still, as I said, it's a phenomenal thrill ride. As I said, it's my favorite ride at Walt Disney World. It actually bumped down Flight of Passage because Flight of Passage was my number one for the longest time. I actually have a shirt that was made. My mom made it for me for Christmas that actually has a picture of me on Cosmic Rewind, and it said my tweet. And she got it blown up on the shirt where it's like Cosmic Rewind demoted Flight of Passage.
That's great. That's great.
But I wanted to ask you, fellas. Now, OG, you were on this ride. Michael, you have not been on this ride yet. Emphasize on yet. um, when it comes to Slinky Dog Dash, now with that, you can look at it and you say, okay, it's a roller coaster with themed Toy Story, but the storyline supposedly is Andy got a roller coaster playset. He
Right.
built
Right.
it and then he put the toys around it and he put Slinky Dog on it. So does that then change the narrative despite you seeing the track?
It does for me. And this is why it's so subjective and case by case, kind of like what I said before with the before California Screaming. It's a wooden themed steel coaster, right? So it's a steel coaster that's themed to a wooden, right? So that's themed. That's kind of like the Andy thing. Like it's a coaster themed coaster, basically. It's a coaster toy. So it counts as theming. Now, Slinky Dog is now better though in the theming department because it stayed true to that direction where it's a toy coaster and it didn't waver from that. Like I said before, with California Screaming, when they made it Incredibles and then they threw in a bunch of figures, it kind of diminished the whole like wooden roller coaster theme they were going with. So I think it got demoted a little bit for that. But Slinky Dog, I would honestly, based on the story, I think it's themed. What do you think, Eva? Would you count that as a themed attraction? Coaster, a toy coaster?
So that's hard because I've watched videos of it. Of course, I haven't been there, so it's hard to say like 100% like definitely either way. But from the video, I mean, it's hard because it's outside, right? You can see it, but I understand the point of what George just said about that. I guess, yeah, it's themed in that way. I mean, like the coaster itself, right? You have, the Slinky Dog. But yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know. I would have to see it for myself in person. I'm going to lean towards actually no at this point until I see it. Because I need to see in person how it actually fits with the rest of the land.
That's fair.
I mean, it's still themed. I think it's still themed, but to that immersiveness, I don't know yet because I haven't been on it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Do you feel like roller coasters have been kind of used now as the scapegoat in the theme park industry? that it's like, okay, well, if we just take a roller coaster, we'll tie something to it, but people will go on it anyways, regardless of how the theming is, because they'll enjoy the roller coaster as a coaster.
Well, I said it before. I think that, and people disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think Universal is taking that route with Epic Universe, for not that same exact route, but something very similar. There's a lot of these outdoor roller coasters in Epic Universe. Well, when you have a big outdoor steel coaster, what are you theming? You're theming just the queue, basically, right? Like the Hulk, you theme the queue. The Starfall Racers, the queue. And so it's like, I think it's a way to sort of save money, because they know, like, we only have to theme the queue. The rest of it's a coaster. So there's an element of money saving there, I think. And that's just my speculation. And I could be completely wrong on that.
Now, do you think, being that you brought up Epic Universe, when you kind of look at the bigger picture, you look at all these lands, you mentioned the Starfall Racers in Celestial Park, roller coaster. The How to Train Your Dragon, gonna have a roller coaster.
Right.
Super Nintendo World, as much as I'm looking forward to Donkey Kong, still, it's a coaster.
Right.
Now I saw that they were testing a roller coaster in Dark Universe, but it's basically just, what it looks to me thus far is just a roller coaster that kind of has like a gothic kind of medieval like look to it. So when you put just a basic coaster that's kind of wrapped around an IP in every single land, does that diminish the whole immersiveness of the park itself?
That's a good. Go ahead, Ebba.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, so to the first question about what you guys were just talking about, I think along with coasters, right? OG, I do agree with you. But also I think it has to do with just other of the other type of thrill rides you have, right? Like anything with the Cougar arm, or like anything that's like upside down or swingy, stuff like that. I think it's a very easy, cheaper way to attract an audience that wants thrills. And you can put some like splash of paint on it and some like little theming, but not a lot of thought goes into the story, the characters, to bring it really to life. So I think that goes for both any type of thrill attraction, plus coasters. Now, sorry, Georgia, what was your question again?
Sorry. Do you feel like having a roller coaster in every single land in Epic Universe, do you feel like that diminishes the park as a whole when it comes to like overall storytelling?
Ooh. So here's where I see it, right? I think that if they have a coaster in every type of land, but if they had like plenty of like other type of dark rides, right? I think personally, I would be fine with that. Just because you have some of that thrill for the thrill people, but then you also have the middle ground family rides, and that's what me and OG and you George were all talking about. Is Universal is missing that all around family from like 4 years old to like 80 years old, right? And on top of that, if you have these other type of spinny, upside down, twisty type of rides, someone like me or OG might not even go on those as well. So I think you got to have a good balance. So if they had like a lot of nice like family style rides plus the coasters, I personally would be fine with that. Just so that way the thrill people will have their rides, but then the rest of the family, they can enjoy still the majority of the park.
Now, does it take away for you, Eva, like when you have like because Dark Universe is going to be amazing, you can just tell.
Yeah.
But does a steel coaster running through that kind of take away from the vibe, or doesn't matter? Or is it too early to tell, sort of?
I think it's too early to tell. I would need to see at least how it's like, once like it's built more, how it's going to be integrated into the land. So I want to see it's kind of like in its full form. And if it's just like some ugly black painted coaster that's like a steel coaster that's off to the side, that's like it's very obvious, then that's going to kind of like be like, okay, just a coaster. But if they're somehow able to integrate it as like a better kind of ride, like Big Thunder or like Everest, where it's very immersive and it fits and flows well with the rest of the land, I think that would be cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, George?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as of right now, what I've seen with the testing, it definitely is an ugly black painted coaster thus far, but now we just have to see again, like where the placement is,
right.
Because what I love of what they did with Wizarding World with Hagrid's is, yes, it's an outdoor coaster and obviously where you could see the track, but they kind of have it in a position where you can kind of see the people going on the motorbike, but you don't necessarily see the full on of the track, which I thought
Right.
was kind of interesting because they kind of have it sitting back where it's like, okay, here's the queue, here's the line for Hagrid's, but you can't necessarily see the full scope of the coaster itself. And I feel like that if the Dark Universe coaster is going to look like how the Starfall Racers is going to look in Celestial Park, then that's going to be an eyesore.
Yeah. That's the thing, yeah. Does it take away? Does the coaster being wrapping through the land take away from the aesthetics of the rest of the land? And it all depends on execution too. It absolutely does. Because I think the Frozen roller coaster they have in Hong Kong. Well, I heard that coaster is way too short, and I would agree. It's like 30 seconds or something. You know, it's way too short. It's crazy. You know.
Yeah. Oh, Joe, you remember I told you I watched the video of it, and it's so short, dude. I was like, this is like Gadget Go Coaster short, bro.
It's really short, and it throws you off because the quality is high, but like, so you're expecting something a little more fleshed out, and it's not. It's like you said, Eva, it's just a Gadget Go Coaster, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like with something like that, that one, you know, it kind of runs through. You kind of see it from the land, but it's different though. It's hidden. It's not this like steel monstrosity loopy thing. You know what I'm saying? So it matters, you know, in terms of how it's done, I think, you know. Now, granted, that ride doesn't like in terms of the duration and all that is not great. But in terms of aesthetically, from its impact for the rest of the land, I think it's minimal. It doesn't really impact it. Or something like, you know, like the Monsters coaster you're talking about, George. That has potential to kind of disrupt the rest of the theming because it's very visibly a steel coaster in the middle of, you know, Monsters Land, so to speak, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll kind of see. Go ahead, George.
And being that you mentioned the Monsters coaster, there was another Monsters coaster that was supposed to be made, which I think would have been phenomenal in visuals and storytelling, where they actually had concepts at Imagineering. It was all raring ready to go, but they had a lot of issues with and I got this from actually an Imagineer himself when I did the dine-in with an Imagineer down at Walt Disney World, that they had issues with sponsorship for this attraction, and it's it was called at the time the Monsters Inc. Door Vaulter coaster, and it was supposed to be like the door chase sequence in the movie Monsters Inc. And actually, that's what Rock and Roller Coaster was supposed to become. And I think if they were to have thought of any kind of storyline that's tied to a roller coaster, I think that would have been genius. Because when you actually watch that scene in that movie, it's almost like Mike and Sully and Boo were riding a type of roller coaster on the doors to get away from Randall.
And that's why this is so case by case and so like subjective, because that would be an attraction where if you had, let's say, Monstropolis, right? And you had the doors going through the land or whatever, it would be fine as a coaster going through the land because, like you said, that whole setup with the doors looks like a coaster in the movie. Mm-hmm. So it's themed, you know what I'm saying? It's like the you know, Andy's backyard with the little toy coaster. It's kind of like that in a weird way. So that would be fine. See, that's why it's so case by case, because you just, you know, but like something like Tron, like, look, it's a Disney ride. I'm not gonna apologize for it. That is not really themed. It's decorated. You have a steel coaster, just like you do at Universal and all these Universal rides, and it just has kind of cool looking vehicles.
Yeah, and also too, I want to say, like, just for everybody out there, it's like that. You know, we're just really talking about the theme of the coasters. You know, we're not really, you know, trying to talk, or I'm not trying to talk smack about the coasters, like, fun factor of it, because of course, a lot of these coasters are like really fun.
And right? I'm the first person to say it. I'm a coaster person. I'm a thrill junkie. You know, everyone who knows me, you know, I'll ride a roller coaster till the cows come home. Yeah. So this is all about just what defines a themed roller coaster to a non-themed roller coaster. It doesn't mean, as Michael said, it doesn't mean that the ride is not good.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't get your thongs in a knot. Just
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Well, and here's the other thing too, right? And like we talked earlier about theming and decorating. It's like, okay, if I have a room, right, and I put a bunch of Mickey Mouse posters on the wall, that's decoration, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But when you walk into Mickey's house, the walls are curved and all the proportions are different, to match like that cartoon world. That's theming, right?
Well,
They're not just slapping stuff on a wall, they're actually shaping the building, and that's the difference, I think, too. Go ahead.
well, so, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's very much just look at Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin. Their cue, that is great theming right there. Because they're building and constructing that world as if it's like a cartoon, right?
Right.
And whereas like Six Flags, again, not hating on the rides itself, but they're just painted color schemes with a name. And yeah, it could be fun coasters, but the theme is very lackluster. And I think where Universal, they need to step it up in their kind of thrill ride department is the theming aspect, right? Like, I know they're kind of, plop in some stuff here and there, like Velocicoaster, right? You have some Raptors and stuff like that. But if they can really make, and I know they can, make a really well themed, story driven like roller coaster, and also like you said, that has a track that's not shown a lot, like on the outside. I think that'd be really dope. Maybe if they can do one somehow that fits with like Back to the Future or something. Yeah,
I think it was you, Michael, that you said it to me over the phone. Correct me if I'm wrong. That you said that kind of Disney and Universal should kind of take some direction with each other in a sense, where Disney would kind of need more of that thrilling aspect, or for Disneyland. I think it was specifically for Disneyland
Yes.
because there's a lot of kid-friendly, family-oriented rides with like the dark rides and Fantasyland and what have you, where Disneyland would need more of that thrill aspect, where with Universal, they need to kind of tone it down some and put more family dark rides in.
Yes, exactly. So to kind of clarify that, what I was telling George was exactly what George said. But I was saying that because obviously I haven't been to Walt Disney World yet, and I'm planning on going. But I noticed that all the rides I wanted to go on, most of them were all coasters, and I was like, hold on a sec. I just realized that Disneyland, well, we have coasters, but we don't have a lot of big coasters, right? Like a lot of coasters are, kind of medium-sized family coasters, and then we have some small ones like Gadgets and Goofy Sky School. But the only really big one that we got is an Incredicoaster. At Walt Disney World, you have plenty of those more, and I think Disneyland Park or Disneyland Resort, they need a bit more bigger coasters, or at least get some more in. Of course, well themed. Of course, that's what we want.
Right.
And so I think then like Universal should then have more themed, dark ride attractions for the families.
Yeah, that's the thing keeping Universal back. I think I think they need to diversify more. And a lot of people think like, well, Harry Potter Forbidden Journey, that's not a roller coaster, but it's not exactly a chill ride either. Like your grandma, 85-year-old grandma's not going on that thing. You know what I'm saying? Whipping her around like that in the Kuka arm. It's still a very.
But I will say though, if she did, she'd probably come off at, whoa man, that took me back to my honeymoon.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah, it's wild, but that's not a roller coaster, but it's very much an overly stimulating attraction. Transformers is another one that whips you around like
and I have
crazy.
to say that was a very bad impression of an elderly woman. So to all those elderly women out there, I do apologize.
No, you're good. No, that was spot on, brother. That was spot on.
Now, Michael, now being that you had mentioned that like more coasters at the Disneyland Resort, but obviously, have it be spot on with theming and what have you. When it comes to where they were deciding on if the Eastern Gateway project was going to get approved, and they were going to expand out the backlot area into the bus area to flesh out more room in Hollywoodland that was supposed to be Marvel, that they were considering on putting in a kind of like a Tron style roller coaster, but themed after Captain America. Now, by doing that, do you think that would have just been like an overall coaster that it just would have been looking like a coaster, sort of like how Six Flags did, as you had mentioned, like with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and what have you, would that have just been a basic roller coaster, but maybe the vehicles would have been designed to look like Captain America? Do you think that that would have been an eyesore to the land for Marvel? Do you think that would have been a good idea, a bad idea, or do you think it would have been a completely different idea where it would have been more indoors, where it could have been more immersive?
So so here's the thing. I'm no Walt Disney Imagineer, so my imagination is not great. But I can't see how a Captain America coaster is going to look like. What are you going to have your coaster look like, a shield or something? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what type of story you would have surrounding it. And that's the other thing I think Disney does a good job with their coasters for theming, for the most part, is that what you're doing on the attraction still makes sense, right? Like, I just don't want to go on a roller coaster just to go on a roller coaster. I want to go on a roller coaster to also have fun, but experience a story with these characters, right? So I don't think, personally, Captain America would make sense. So to your point, George, I think it would just probably look like, probably a little bit better, but I think it would look something kind of like Incredicoaster, where it's just kind of slapped on there, not really well thought out. But for sure, yeah, I'd be down for another roller coaster, but make it make sense with the story, and write or correct characters for it. And I would say too, like, I'm not talking about bringing Six Flags type of coasters to Disneyland or the Disneyland Resort, right? Nothing too crazy,
Right.
but something to the style of Cosmic Rewind or Expedition Everest or what's the other one? Rocket Roller Coaster, right? Keep it at like that kind of thrill level. But I wouldn't bring anything in like Goliath or Superman or anything like
So
that.
you think if they would have gone through with it, it basically would have been like that kind of coaster?
In my opinion, yeah, I do think so.
What say you, Mr. Grove 55?
Well, I heard it was supposed to be the Tron coaster. I heard that's the ride system they were going to use for it, was the Tron coaster. Obviously, it would be truncated if they were going to put it in DCA. They couldn't make the same size. But if they went with the Tron coaster, that's interesting, because then when you're sitting on the bike, the back part could be the shield, like Michael was saying. So it looks like you're rocking the shield, like you put it behind you and you're going, that would look kind of cool. My issue, the vehicles, they could figure that out and make that look really dope. That would be an easy idea for Captain America. But the issue for me with that one is, what's the attraction, like you were saying, about what's the attraction going to be? Are you just going to go through a bunch of cityscape?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do on the ride, though? And if it's just going to be like Tron, where you're outside like that, that's just a coaster at that point,
Yeah, and also too, here's the thing, right? It's like that. Would they make it the same track layout as Tron as well? Like, I don't want the same track layout. I want something different.
Right,
So,
exactly. We need something that's a little different. And DCA, you probably would have to do something different, because I don't think they would have the room for that. That thing is such a gargantuan. I didn't realize until we went into Florida, George, how big that.
It's huge. It is. It's gigantic. Or as one of my, as Kaylee calls it, well, my Georgisms, that it's what do I say? It's ginormous.
Ginormous.
Yes,
There it is. It's
ginormous
huge.
George.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation. It is, because and this is the weird thing when it comes to this stuff, is that like I said before, it's just so subjective. There's people who have disagreed with me on Velocicoaster. What are you talking about? That's so themed. You have the Raptors. You got some rock work. We're good. I don't see it, and I don't see it with Tron either. You know what I'm saying? So, but some people think these are themed, some people don't.
Yeah.
It's also subjective, and it's interesting. It's an interesting kind of debate,
And when it comes to the Velocicoaster, now, if you want to see a themed ride, now this isn't a roller coaster, but I feel like it's heavily themed, is like the Jurassic Park River Adventure or the Jurassic World River Adventure at Universal Hollywood. That is overall themed, as for an attraction. Yeah, for the Velocicoaster, yeah, it's basically just like a testing ground, that it's like, okay, you're going to feel like what it is as if you were a raptor. And it's a fun coaster. It's very thrilling. I mean, it's like that thing goes nonstop at the time you start, like, and it goes faster as the ride goes. Like, it doesn't slow up.
So sorry, George, I have a question for you guys, for both of you, and for if people are watching. And this can be regarding for any ride, particular, but since we're talking about coasters, what do you think about the theming and story regards to, like George, you brought up, right? You are like a raptor, right? Running through, Jurassic World.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So okay, so what do you guys think about like the idea on an attraction that you are the character, or that you are following the character, observing the events? What do you think about that difference? And does that difference on a coaster is that like a make or break type of deal?
That's interesting. I would prefer not being the character. I think that works better. We've seen evidence, like for example, Indiana Jones Adventure. You're not Indiana Jones,
right?
And then you can see Indiana Jones along the way. I think that's pretty dope. Yeah. Same with the Spider-Man ride at Islands of Adventure. You're not Spider-Man, so you can see him along the way.
Yeah, I like teaming up with the character.
Yeah.
Or like watching the character. I don't necessarily like being the character. And I feel like, and this has nothing to do with the roller coaster, but I feel like that's kind of where the direction of Galaxy's Edge was going, where it's like you're a character in this immersive storyline and you're supposed to meet up with bounty hunters and you have to flee the. It's like, I don't want to roll when I'm going to a theme park. Like if I wanted to do that, like I'd go be an actor and I'd go on auditions and stuff like that to be in a Star Wars movie, which I think would be really cool to be on the set of a Star Wars movie. I'm not gonna lie, but I mean, like when I'm in a theme park, I just want to enjoy myself, be immersed, and go on rides. It's like, don't bother me with this role playing bullshit.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And if I can just interject this real quick, so SeaWorld, right? I'm by about 35 minutes from SeaWorld San Diego. You look at their coasters, right? They're fun, and George, I know they have a couple I know you'll go on because they're big, crazy, scary ones. But and me and OG would be waiting there.
Yeah, exactly.
But you look at these coasters, they're like a general theme, right? It's as blue paint, it's about a certain animal. But you look at like the queue and like the surrounding area of like the loading station and like the tracks itself. No theming, no atmosphere whatsoever. It's bare bones. I think in some cases even worse than Six Flags, to be honest. And yeah, it's like, okay, so the coaster, the Emperor, dude, their loading station has no covering at all. So you're standing out there in like the sun, dude. And it's like, and the new coaster they just opened up has only like some fake snow on it because it's an Arctic rescue ride. And one helicopter like prop, and that's it. Everything else is just like this fake like tree, like walls of trees right here, and it's very bare bones. They need to really up their theming like on these coasters. But yeah, there is a difference between theming, heavy involvement, immersive storytelling for these coasters, and like the thing is that I wouldn't be able to come up with something because I think it's really hard to try to come up with a story that makes sense with the characters for something that's supposed to go fast, right? So Disney and Universal, they can both do it, but I need to see Universal do more, and I'd like to see Disney bring more bigger coasters to the park.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Interesting conversation, gentlemen. I mean, interesting conversation. I know everybody at home, I know you guys and gals have opinions on this. It's a very, very subjective situation. Some people are going to think something seemed, some people won't. It's just very subjective. So comment down below. We would all love to hear from you. Thank you all for watching this episode of OG55. And until the next video, peace.
세상이 누구에게나 공평하게 추악해.